When we talk about coming-of-age films, many people immediately think of dramatic conflicts or life-altering events. But this film chooses a quieter, more reflective path. It invites us to look inward, to recognize moments that feel ordinary at first, yet later reveal themselves as deeply meaningful. At the center of this story is Yuki, a young man standing at a crossroads familiar to many viewers. The moment when childhood comfort begins to give way to adult responsibility. Yuki grows up in a small but emotionally rich family. His home is defined not by wealth or grand ambition, but by consistency, warmth, and mutual support. His mother represents a calm, steady presence, someone who rarely speaks in long speeches, but communicates love through thoughtful actions. Alongside her is Hikaru, Yuki's older sister, whose energy and confidence seem to naturally fill any room she enters. From a young age, Hikaru excels in sports and social life, effortlessly becoming a role model both inside and outside the family. What makes the film particularly effective is how it handles this sibling dynamic. There is no bitterness, no overt rivalry. Instead, the contrast between Yuki and Hikaru quietly shapes Yuki's inner world. He is not discouraged by his sister's achievements, but he is constantly aware of them. This awareness becomes a mirror through which he measures his own progress, sometimes unfairly. His efforts culminate in a significant milestone. He receives a scholarship to study abroad. The moment is not presented as a triumphant spectacle. Instead, it arrives quietly, almost modestly, reflecting the film's broader tone. At the same time, Hikaru experiences her own transition by securing her first professional job. The film places these two developments side by side, not to create competition, but to show how life moves forward for everyone, often simultaneously and unexpectedly. For their mother, these changes are deeply emotional. She recognizes that her children are preparing to step into independent lives, and rather than holding on to them, she chooses to honor the moment. Her response is simple yet powerful. She plans a family vacation. This trip is not portrayed as an escape or a celebration of success alone, but as an intentional pause. It is a chance to gather, to share time without urgency, and to create a memory before routines and distances begin to reshape the relationship. There is no rush to arrive at conclusions or emotional peaks. Instead, the story allows us to sit with the characters, observe their routines, and recognize ourselves in their quiet moments. There is no dramatic announcement that this trip is important, yet every small detail suggests it carries more weight than the characters openly acknowledge. Yuki, in particular, becomes more observant during this time. He listens more than he speaks. He notices the way his mother carefully plans each day, not out of control, but out of care. He notices Hikaru's confidence, now shaped not just by youth, but by responsibility. Yuki is no longer comparing himself to his sister out of uncertainty, but out of reflection. He begins to recognize that growth does not follow a single timeline, nor does it demand constant validation. Meals, walks, and casual conversations are presented without dramatic framing. Yet within these ordinary interactions, the film highlights subtle shifts. Hikaru speaks about her new job with cautious optimism, balancing excitement with humility. Their mother listens attentively, asking thoughtful questions rather than offering advice. Yuki, meanwhile, realizes that adulthood is not defined by certainty, but by the willingness to move forward despite uncertainty. Yuki's realization that he does not need to catch up to anyone marks a quiet turning point. He begins to see his scholarship not as proof of worth, but as an opportunity for learning and contribution. The film gently challenges the idea that success must look a certain way or arrive at a specific time. By placing two siblings on different paths without judgment, it promotes a healthier view of personal development. This message is particularly valuable in a media environment often driven by comparison and urgency. The family vacation itself becomes symbolic. It represents a shared pause before inevitable separation, not filled with sadness, but with mutual respect. The mother's role during this period is especially noteworthy. She does not cling to the past or resist change. Instead, she models emotional maturity by creating space for connection while accepting that her children are ready to move forward. This portrayal reinforces the film's educational value, presenting parenting as guidance rather than control. The film reminds us that some of the most meaningful climaxes in life are internal recognitions that quietly reshape how we see ourselves and those we love. The film does not introduce conflict in the traditional sense. Instead, it allows unspoken feelings to surface through stillness and shared presence. This is where the drama lives, not in arguments or confrontations, but in the quiet recognition that time is moving forward whether anyone is ready or not. Yuki begins to experience a growing sense of emotional clarity. Being away from his usual routines gives him space to reflect on his past, his expectations, and his fears about the future. He realizes that much of the pressure he has felt was never imposed by his family, but constructed internally. The film handles this realization with restraint, avoiding self-criticism and instead guiding Yuki toward self-understanding. This approach reinforces a constructive message. Personal growth often begins with compassion toward oneself. Hikaru's presence during this phase becomes especially meaningful. Rather than being portrayed as an unreachable ideal, she is shown as thoughtful and grounded. She speaks openly about adjusting to her new responsibilities, acknowledging that confidence does not eliminate uncertainty. This moment subtly reframes Yuki's long-standing perception of her. He sees that strength and vulnerability are not opposites, but complementary qualities. From an analytical standpoint, this reframing is central to the film's emotional payoff. The mother's role continues to anchor the story. She observes more than she intervenes, trusting that her children are capable of navigating their own emotions. Her quiet attentiveness communicates reassurance without direction, offering an example of supportive presence that feels both realistic and instructive. The film presents this dynamic as an emotional safety net, emphasizing that independence does not require emotional distance. One particularly effective aspect of this section is the way the film uses shared memories. Casual references to childhood moments arise naturally, not as nostalgia, but as acknowledgement of continuity. These reflections help Yuki understand that leaving home does not mean leaving behind who he is. Instead, it means carrying those experiences forward in a new context. This realization marks a subtle but important emotional turning point. From a viewer's perspective, this dramatic phase invites reflection. It encourages audiences to consider how they respond to change in their own lives. The film does not frame uncertainty as a weakness, but as an inevitable and even valuable part of growth. By normalizing this experience, it provides reassurance, particularly for younger viewers navigating transitions, while offering affirmation to older audiences who have lived through similar moments. There is no sadness expressed outright, but a collective awareness settles in. The family understands that this chapter is closing, and rather than resisting it, they choose presence. Shared laughter, simple routines, and unhurried conversations become acts of intention. These moments emphasize a core lesson of the film. Meaningful connections are strengthened through attention, not duration. Yuki appears more grounded. He has not resolved every question about his future, but he no longer views uncertainty as something to fear. Instead, he sees it as an open space for learning. The drama, therefore, is not about overcoming obstacles, but about embracing transition with honesty and gratitude. In doing so, the film reinforces a positive, educational message about emotional resilience and the value of supportive relationships during life's most defining moments. In the end, the film gently reminds us that growing up is not about leaving people behind, but about carrying their influence forward with care. Yuki's journey shows that comparison can evolve into self-understanding, and uncertainty can become a space for learning. The lasting lesson is simple yet powerful. Cherish shared moments, accept change with grace, and remember that emotional connection is a strength, not something we outgrow.